Thank you everyone for joining tonight's webinar, Gluten-Free Travel Made Easier, a conversation with seasoned gluten-free travelers. My name is Kaylee McCauley and I am a registered dietitian with Celiac Canada. So whether you're headed out for a summer vacation, traveling internationally, or just trying to figure out how to manage a road trip with celiac disease, tonight's session is all about helping you travel safely, more confidently, and enjoyably on a gluten-free diet. So before we begin, I just want to say thank you to our sponsor, Odo's, for our webinar sponsor. They've generously sponsored tonight's event along with all of our other specialty webinars that we have this year. So they're also providing a gluten-free swag bag. We will be giving away to one of the lucky attendees at the very end of the session. So make sure you stay for that and we'll announce it at the end. And just a few housekeeping pointers before we get started. So this webinar is being recorded. The replay will be sent to your inbox, usually by Friday, just a couple days after the webinar, along with a short post-webinar survey. So please fill that out and provide us with some feedback, and some helpful travel resources as well. Please feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen to submit any questions, and we'll save some time at the end to answer as many as we can. Tonight's session will be more conversational, so a little bit different than our usual webinars. It's not a formal presentation. I'll guide our panelists through a few key topics, and they'll share their personal experiences, strategies, and tips with everyone. Okay, so let's meet our panelists, starting with Erin Smith. Erin Smith is a passionate advocate for individuals with celiac disease and the founder of Gluten-Free Globetrotter. Diagnosed with celiac disease in 1981, she has spent her life navigating a gluten-free lifestyle and inspiring others to do the same. Her blog and website, Gluten-Free Globetrotter, have become invaluable resources for travelers seeking gluten-free options around the world. Through her tireless efforts, Erin has transformed the way people with celiac disease approach food and travel. Her dedication to raising awareness and empowering others makes her a true leader in the gluten-free community. Originally from New York and now living in Montreal, Erin has long been a pioneer in the gluten-free community. Next, we have Mark. Mark was diagnosed with celiac disease in 2005 and has made celiac-friendly travel a priority ever since. He's traveled to 75 countries, touching all continents, and dreams of one day visiting every country. Mark grew up in Ontario and now lives with his wife and 2 cats in Victoria, BC. He holds his master's degree in political management, political science, and communication, and is a federal civil servant in his day job. Apart from travel, he fills up his spare time with volunteering with Celiac Canada and other organizations and studies Spanish on the side. You can follow him and his travels at the Celiac Explorer on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Now for Nicole Byram. Nicole is a registered dietitian with extensive experience in clinical nutrition and media management. She works with Celiac Canada, providing expert guidance on managing celiac disease and gluten-related disorders. As a clinical dietitian, Nicole serves both inpatient and outpatient settings, offering personalized nutrition care to diverse populations. Nicole is also the go-to dietitian for Global News, where she provides expert commentary and insights on the range of nutrition topics. She runs a thriving private practice helping clients achieve their health and wellness goals through evidence-based nutrition strategies. Nicole lives in North Vancouver with her husband and children, balancing her professional commitments with family life in the beautiful West Coast community. Thank you guys for being here. Okay, so let's start off with one of the most important parts of safe, confident travel, which is planning ahead. So we asked people to submit their questions beforehand. We also gathered some on the Facebook group, and I think these are the most common questions we've received from people ahead of the session. So we'll start with these. Again, please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll have some time to answer everyone's questions at the end. So we'll start with what do you always do before a trip to prepare? I'll start with Erin first, and we can go around.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So for any trip, I do my research ahead of time. I make researching my destination part of my trip planning. I look for restaurants. I look for supermarkets. I just got back on Saturday from an all-inclusive. So about 6 weeks prior to my trip, I reached out to the all-inclusive resort. So I like to start my research ahead of time so that way when I am actually doing my travels that I can enjoy my travel and not have to stress about it while I'm traveling. So research before the trip, I feel like there's not any it's never too soon to start your research. And
Mhm.
I also research destinations that I'd love to go to one day. But I just a lot of research preparing for the trip.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's super helpful. Mark, do you have anything to add to that?
I can't overstate the importance of research, as Aaron said. It really makes your trip a lot easier. So, for example, if it's a domestic trip, I go to Facebook. From Victoria to St. John's, there are gluten-free or celiac groups, Celiac Canada groups, and otherwise for pretty much all major cities in Canada. For international travel, especially to areas that are less gluten-free friendly, I look up travel blogs, TripAdvisor. Within reviews on
Mm.
TripAdvisor for restaurants or resorts, you can like search gluten and it pulls up all mentions of gluten. Maybe it's terrible, maybe it's great, but it's good to know this beforehand. Check the local celiac organization if there is one. From Argentina to Russia to New Zealand, I have
Mhm.
gotten great information from the local celiac society organization, whatever they're called, especially like restaurant recommendations and where to pick up gluten-free food at supermarkets, like Aaron mentioned. And a shout out to the Find Me Gluten-Free app that I personally love and contribute a lot to as much as I can. It's also been helpful all over the world.
Awesome. And is there anything in particular that you look for when you're researching around?
Um, well, when I'm booking my accommodation, well, it depends on where you are in the world, but let's take Paris, for example, where I had the good fortune of going shortly before the pandemic. Did my research on the restaurants, did my research on, looked at various supermarkets that I knew stocked gluten-free products, and I picked my accommodation based in part on those locations. Am I near the metro line so I can get downtown? I
Mhm.
mean, city center Paris is extremely expensive, but if you don't mind a 40-minute ride on a train, you can save a lot of money. And yeah, try to stay close to where a restaurant is. Maybe you're in a spot where there isn't much choice, but an Airbnb or a hotel that has a kitchenette can really be a
Mhm.
lifesaver. I was in South Korea a few months ago. Very difficult place to eat gluten-free when you're dining out, especially if you don't speak a lick of Korean like I don't. But having my own kitchen in the hotel room, I went to the supermarket. I was able to find, bread and that kind of thing difficult, but there's a lot of naturally gluten-free foods out there that you can rely on even during your vacation.
Yeah, great tips. And Nicole, I know with your family, it may be a little bit different when you're planning ahead because you do have to plan ahead for the family. So is there anything else that you wanted to add? And your mic as well. Sorry.
Thank you. So yeah, for us as traveling as a family of five and two my husband and my daughter being celiac, 2 out of 5 of us, I find one of the big things that I'm doing. So we're actually in the preparation stage or the final steps of the preparation stage, heading to Australia. And I have not been before, so I've been doing a lot of research. So I've been going through this at the moment. And one of the big things is learning the label guidelines for that country. That's really big for me. So what do they have to, what of the gluten sources, barley, rye, regular oats, and wheat, what do they legally have to label if it's in the food or
Hmm.
not? So really better trying to understand what the label is telling me and how safe it is for me to read. Like we know the labeling guidelines in Canada, we've worked really hard on that document, but when you
Hmm.
go other places, what does it translate to? So understanding that, and then that piece about a kitchen for us, restaurant dining is just really stressful. So as much as I like to go on vacation and not cook, there is a time and a place for going on vacation, finding that condo with a kitchen in it so you can do that, know your label reading, go to the grocery store, buy what you know your family's going to be safe to have, and doing that. We've had great experiences in restaurants while traveling, and we've had some not so good experiences in restaurants while traveling. So and that the other piece of that is remembering to get those translation cards. Again, like Erin said, doing the work before you go so you don't have to do it when you're on vacation, because vacation, it hopefully isn't about stressing, it's about relaxing, and you've done the work and you've got your translation cards and you've got all that ready to go, and you know how to read the labels, and you've done what Mark said, you've gone in the Facebook groups, you know what restaurants are safe or what ones have been recommended, and then really leaning into all of that information. And I can't emphasize enough asking people, asking the questions to the community. What has worked for you? Where, even if you're thinking about an all-inclusive, what all-inclusive worked for you? Where was it? And almost planning that on the recommendations, because it's so much easier to go somewhere that you know you're setting yourself up for success with than it is to go somewhere blind.
Yeah, I love that. Really helpful tips there. And for people who are looking up, labeling in different places, what is the best way to do that? If someone was wondering, if they're going to the US or if they're going to another country, how do you figure out what the labeling laws are there opposed to our Canadian labeling laws?
Yeah, so I mean, us as dietitians, we're going to go to the source that'll be the most reliable, which will probably be like Celiac Canada for us. We know that dietitians have had a hand in that. So same with the UK, they've got the diet the help me out with the name of the UK group. I'm
Celiac UK, I think it
Celiac
is.
Celiac
UK.
UK.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. And same with Australia. So that's where I've gone. I've gone to the source, the expert sources. And if not, then you can always go check out, as something as simple as just Googling labeling laws for celiac disease, gluten sources in food, and then see what reliable sources, looking for government sources, looking for something reliable, not just something that somebody's decided to put online, because we don't always
Hmm.
trust that, but looking for a reliable, trustworthy source to look for that. But I would always go to a celiac organization from that country first.
Yeah. Yeah, great tips. Erin, while we're on that topic, I know that you're very knowledgeable in the US labeling laws. Is there anything that people need to be cautious about for when they're going to the US that comes to mind?
I think the biggest difference with the US and Canada is the oats. I personally can't eat oats, but there's I think here it must be a gluten-free
Hmm.
oat source in
Yeah.
Canada. That's not exactly the case in the US. So I would just be careful with that. And the other thing, just allergies in general, is that in the US, they label the top 9 allergens, but they don't have to call out gluten on the label. And I'm seeing that more and more here. And I was just in Mexico and they actually called out gluten right on the labels of most of the products I was looking at. So I think it's just making sure to read the labels. And also if it's a product you're familiar with at home, it doesn't necessarily mean the ingredients are the same
Mm.
overseas and in other countries. So it's be sure to always read the labels if you are going grocery shopping or, looking for products in other countries. You can never let your guard down.
Yeah.
And if I could just add one thing to that, I believe barley is also the other exclusion. In the US, they don't have to label barley, and that's part of not having to label all gluten sources. But barley legally in Canada does have to be disclosed, whereas in the US it doesn't. So that ingredient of yeast extract, whereas in Canada we would have to say bracket barley, in the US they wouldn't have to put bracket barley following it. So anything that's packaged that doesn't have a gluten-free label that has yeast extract in it would be a question mark for me.
Mhm.
Mm. And yeah, so you would just to figure out if something is safe or not, you would look for those, you would look to see if it had extract, and maybe you wouldn't
Yeah,
eat.
so in the US, and I mean, Erin, I don't want to, you lived there for a long time, for most of your life by the sounds of it. But when we're down there, I look for whole foods like dairy products, which are very, very low risk, meats and veg and that sort of thing. And then if I'm in the aisles, I'm looking for gluten-free claims or something that has very simple ingredients.
Yeah, and there is a certification program in the US. So
Hmm. Yeah.
I think to Nicole's point earlier of like going to the source, like if you familiarize yourself with the logo of like what the certification is for that country. I know Australia has their own certification, Argentina has their own certification. So becoming familiar with that logo so you know what to look for when you're in that country, I think is really helpful. In the US, there are multiple certification services, but there is kind of like a general one. And it's similar to Canada, which has like the standard, but I think that's really important is like get to know what the logo is.
Well, and knowing that the term gluten-free in what countries does that in itself hold clout? So like
Mhm.
in the UK and Australia and New Zealand, the term gluten-free is coined. So whether it's a certification or whether it's just written as gluten-free, that is to be trusted and safe. And the same goes for the US, whether it's a certification or whether it's written.
Mhm.
Yeah, really good tips. That's awesome. And while we're on the topic of, planning ahead, um, what are everyone's, I know you mentioned one, Mark, but what are everyone's go-to tools or resources? Can you trust these apps? And do you guys have a favorite that you use?
Yeah, I could carry on with what I was mentioning for the find me gluten free. So yeah, this is crowdsourced. Someone might say this restaurant is safe, but can you trust it? It's a good guide, but don't. It's not necessarily going to be 100% accurate as well. Look at the dates of the review.
Mm.
Sometimes I see a restaurant rated very highly, like, oh, that was 5 years ago. Probably a lot has changed, hopefully for the better, but possibly for the worse. Staff change, different staff have different perspectives, so you need to always be prepared to advocate for yourself. That's where I think Nicole mentioned the celiac travel cards, because if they speak a language that you do not, that complicates it as well. That again, Nicole talked about you don't want vacation to be the stressful time. So yeah, read the reviews, take them with a grain of salt. Check out the websites. If you're aware of and asking the question in the Facebook group, for example, Celiac Canada has a
Mm.
gigantic Facebook group. Chances are, if you're going there, someone else has too, and it certainly has helped me to get that firsthand experience from people that have celiac disease, not someone for whom it is a choice. So the apps are great. So are TripAdvisor reviews. So is Yelp if it's still around.
Mhm.
But you still have to be ready to ask those hard questions and advocate for yourself when you're traveling, because you do not want to get sick on your vacation, of course.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Um, what about, I know I see a question here in the chat box, but I know ChatGPT is becoming really popular. Would you rely on that for planning your trips, or how accurate do you think it is for planning your trips around gluten-free foods and stuff?
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
So I have I moved here to Montreal from New York City last year, and I have an extensive guide to New York on my website. So I did a test just to see.
Yeah.
And what I found was that ChatGPT basically pulled any menu that even said the word gluten-free and said it was a gluten-free restaurant. So I would tread very lightly with ChatGPT.
Mm.
it is not a person, it is a bot. And I'm seeing this more and more. There's a lot of planning services now that are relying on that. But I don't think it can replace ever having that conversation. And just in terms of research and going back a little, if I find places I want to try in a new country, a new city, I contact all of those places ahead of time. Usually just send them a quick message on direct message on Instagram and say, hey, I see you have gluten-free options. You know, I have celiac disease. And I know this is jumping ahead a little, but I can tell pretty quickly based on the response I get whether or not they know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
Whereas ChatGPT can't do that. So like I've
Yeah.
had this now interaction that says, hey, you know, can you accommodate me? And if they say, sure, no problem, then I ask more questions. And you know, it'll never replace asking questions when I get there. But I actually am a little nervous about people relying on ChatGPT for planning because I do think it could really lead to some people getting very sick on vacation.
Mm. It's a great point about not being able to replace the human aspect. I've WhatsApped many a restaurant, similar to Aaron, like Instagram. It's also a way to kind of get around the language barrier because you can do some translating, like through Google. It's it's much better than trying to stumble through a conversation with 10 words in a language in person and flashing a card at them. If you can ask those questions in advance and yeah, see whether it's there's any if the answers give you the reassurance that you're looking for or they don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It may become better, but yeah, I do agree. Right now, you have to ask the questions. Okay, so we'll go on to another section. So eating on the go. We'll talk about what happens when you're actually on the move, whether you're flying, driving, or exploring a new place. So these are some of the most popular questions in this category, I would say. Um, I will just kind of I will ask the question and whoever wants to answer can. So what gluten-free snacks or meals do you pack or keep in your carry-on? What are your go-to?
I'll jump
Nicole.
in on that one because I now this is my little my trick because I love to shop on vacation, but I pack half a case of food, eat it, and then I have half a case of souvenirs I can bring home. So that's my one little tip. But I do like to pack a lot of snacks on the flight because we've had a number of times that there's just nothing for Julie to have, and I don't want her to go hungry for long periods of time. And there's only so many bags of Lay's potato chips that one can actually eat that you can buy at the either even on a lot of planes they have Pringles which aren't gluten free, so that can be challenging. But I always pack in my case, I always pack things like rice crackers, made good bars, nuts and seeds. I bring gluten free, um like cashews or pumpkin seeds, something that's more filling, higher in protein. Fruit leathers are good, or other dried fruit, some dark chocolate, that sort of thing. I
Yeah, I
always
love that.
pack some in my carry-on for, in case there's a delay, depending on how long the flight is. So to Australia, I'm obviously going to pack a lot more to a flight down to, you know, somewhere within Canada or down to the US. That's only going to be a 2 or 3 hour flight. It's obviously going to be a little bit different. But I do like to pack a lot of those things. Rice crackers in particular are really light, easy to pack. I'll sometimes even go as far as packing a gluten-free pasta that I know my family likes so that I know we can have it when we're there and then we can just easily get a sauce. But the dried fruit and the nuts are really good. And then that dark chocolate, and it kind of rounds out things a little bit. But those are my go-tos for packing.
Mhm. Great snacks. And do you ever have any trouble with that, going through security or anything?
Never. No, those
Never.
things as long, no, I've never had any issues with any of that. As long as it's in the original packaging, it's labeled, and there's no meat products or dairy products or seeds like pits or seeds in an actual fruit source. Wouldn't want to bring that across the border, but dried fruit should be fine.
Mm, awesome. Anyone else?
So I just went to Mexico, and this was my first time in all of my years of travel that my ice pack was confiscated at the Montreal
Oh,
airport. So I
wow.
usually travel with a lot of food as well. I had 2 sandwiches. I had cut up fruit, which I had planned to eat, in the airport for breakfast before getting on the flight. But it was the very first time that they took my ice pack and they threw it away. So, and this is like after years of traveling for work. So I will say that was a little bit frustrating, but I always pack at least 2 sandwiches. I also like to have like some protein sources for longer flights. One thing that I've been doing is you can buy like these quinoa cups that are ready to eat. It's like a good source of protein. Um, I will say coming home, I always find harder, and I would love to hear what Nicole and Mark have to
Mm-hmm.
say, but like coming home is difficult because you don't have the same access necessarily, unless you have a kitchen. But coming home from Mexico this past weekend, um, it was just a lot of snacks, to be honest. I did get something in the airport, and my husband speaks Spanish fluently, so he asked some questions for me, but coming home is always harder than going to your destination.
Agree on that one 100%.
Yeah, I know on there's been lots of talk about airplane food and well, the quality of it is one thing, but then the fact that sometimes your meal reservation got lost or whatever. So yeah, it's about being prepared, of course. Be cautious with like as Nicole alluded to, things in original packaging are generally okay, but I've seen people online saying, "Oh, I take veggies and hummus," or "I take hard-boiled eggs." A lot of countries don't care, but there are some countries that you cannot take food across. I
Mhm.
mean, without you declare it and they decide whether to allow it through or not. I don't think I've ever been asked about food when I've gone to anywhere in the European Union, but like Australia, for example, very strict on food coming in. The US always wants to know what food I'm bringing in. Usually it's fine. Like the examples that Aaron gave and Nicole gave work very well. If you do, you can bring veggies and hummus and hard-boiled eggs for a long flight. Just make sure you consume them before you land and have to go through customs,
Mhm.
which can be a bit tricky with the U.S. because you might clear customs while you're still in Canada. Be
Right.
mindful of that. But yeah, when I yeah, bring food along and I make a plan for when I'm going to a destination. I mean, a cruise or an all-inclusive is different, but if I'm going to a destination where I'm on my own, one of the first things I do when I get to the new place is go to a supermarket or go to a local gluten-free bakery, if there is one. Stock up.
Yeah. Do you usually look for Airbnbs when you go traveling so that you have that flexibility to have a kitchen?
A lot of hotel rooms do have kitchenettes. It's more common
Right.
than you might expect. If you, for example, go on a site like Expedia, that'll show different room categories, and some might have a kitchenette. Uh, Location is a factor for me. Thinking of where I want to go in a European city, for example, you want to be somewhere near transit or where it's not ridiculously far to get places. So Airbnb is great because there's always a kitchen, but sometimes you're a room in a shared house. Big risk
Right.
there. Or you might have your own private room, but a shared kitchen for like a hostel or something. So uh, you try to find the best deal you can, but in an environment that will be safe for you. I generally try to avoid anywhere where I'm going to be sharing a kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same here.
I wanted to add something about Airbnb because this caught me by surprise, like pleasant surprise. But I was going to Marseille, France a few years ago, and when you can communicate with your host, I always ask questions. Are you near a metro? Da da da. I just kind of like put it in there. I was like, oh, and I have celiac disease. Do you know any gluten-free restaurants or just by chance? So the host's sister had celiac disease. She knew everything about it. She's like, I'm going to scrub my kitchen for you. And then she left me a gift basket of gluten-free products. And I was shocked. I was like, you immediately get a 10-star review. It was the first time I ever did it. And now I've done it every time since. She's the only host that acknowledged it, but she knew. And I was like, this is fantastic. So I will say, like, it doesn't hurt to put that in there. It's a conversation starter anyway. If they have no clue what
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about, fine. But you might be pleasantly surprised, like I was, because I did not expect that in France of all places. So
Wow. Yeah, that is a nice surprise. And it's true. Just mention it and you may be pleasantly surprised. What about Nicole? I know you and your family love to go to Disney. How are the options there?
Mhm. So, Disney is one of, as many of you know, who, if any of you know me out there, one of my favorite places to travel to. And Disney is an incredible place for gluten-free. And if anybody's interested, there is a video that I made on gluten-free dining in Disneyland that's on Celiac Canada's website. And there is a video that I made on gluten-free dining in Disney World on my YouTube channel, just my name. And you can see that there. And it's really, really inclusive, as Disney likes to be, really wonderful, easy to get food, trustworthy food. Even gluten-free churros we found in Animal Kingdom Lodge, or Animal Kingdom, excuse me, last February 2024 when we were there. Haven't been. We're going to go to Disneyland Paris next year, so that'll be exciting. But yeah, wonderful place to be. Really easy, and on even on their online ordering app. So if you do mobile ordering with Disney, you can make that, you can say gluten-free on their mobile ordering app. And if you make advanced reservations, which I highly suggest you do if you're going to be doing any sit-down dining, and they will, there is a spot there as well. And when you arrive, the chef comes out, talks to you about the offerings that you can safely choose from when you're there. And if it's a buffet, the chef will come out, walk you through the buffet and say what you can order. And if there's any hesitation, because with buffets, we know there can be a lot of cross-contamination, they will make stuff for you in the back kitchen and then bring it out fresh for you. So there is no there's no fears, and we've never had an issue. In fact, I've been in tears of joy there because they've been so good to Julie in
Oh, wow.
particular.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot from you, that you've had a lot of success there, which is awesome. Is there anything specific that you ask when you um, go dining out or go to a place that you haven't been before and you want to ensure that they are gluten-free? Is there anything specific that you ask the kitchen or the servers?
Is this Disney or anywhere?
I guess it applies to anywhere. Yeah.
Anywhere, yeah. So, I think the biggest thing is just letting them know. So I'll tell a really quick story. We were in Hawaii a few years ago, and I've told the story in the Gluten-Free 101 several times, but so apologies to anybody who's heard it. But we went to a restaurant across the way, and it was, Julie ordered a gluten-free cheese quesadilla. And it looked, and I explained that my daughter and my husband are celiac. I tend to do the talking just because
Hmm.
I'm the dietitian at the table and they default to me. But I say, it's the only time, and I'm not sure, Mark and Aaron, if you would agree with this or not, but it's the only time I ever refer to gluten as an allergy. We know it's not an immune disease. We know it's not an allergy, but it's the language that everybody seems to understand the severity, because that's how severe this is. And so I'll say, please mark it as an allergy. My daughter's celiac, my husband's celiac. Please mark this down as an allergy for the kitchen, because that's the language the kitchen will best
Hmm.
understand. They brought out our gluten-free quesadilla, and I looked at it and I thought, that's not gluten-free. And I said to the server, walked away, and I called her back and I said, I just don't think that's a gluten-free quesadilla. And she said, no, it is. I put it in. And now Julie's anxious, and she looked at me and I said, and I called her back again. And I said, do you mind taking this back to the kitchen just to double check, because it doesn't look like it. Turns out it was a full flour quesadilla. She would have been, I can't imagine how sick if she'd eaten the whole thing. And so the biggest thing is, yes, you're going to talk about it. You're going to say to your server, this is serious. Please mark it as an allergy. It's celiac disease, but continue to advocate for yourself as much as possible. And my favorite word is unapologetic. So unapologetically advocate for yourself. You don't, I mean, you can say thank you so much and you can be grateful, and we can still be very Canadian through all of this, but we do have to um, we don't have to, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, be worried and eat it to be polite.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's what a lot of people get worried about, that
Mhm.
they're being a bother or they're concerning
Mhm.
someone. So I think, yeah, that's really good advice.
They're there to make you happy. They want to get a good tip, so you send them back to the kitchen 5 times to verify things, you can thank them with a
Yes.
nice tip. Like
It's
Yes.
exact, and that's what I always say too. I tip well, but we would have been in the hospital that night had we not.
Hmm.
So it's serious. So you really do advocate.
Yeah, that's a good tip, and it kind of leans into our next session, which is lessons learned. And I was going to ask, since you've all traveled a lot, have you ever gotten sick while traveling? And what did you learn from it? And I guess this goes for your girl too, Nicole.
I could start. I
Hmm.
went in 2018, I went to France and Germany.
Hmm.
I was pregnant and I got some pre-made salad from a supermarket. It had the gluten-free label on it. I suspect it was cross-contaminated somewhere. And by the time my plane from France landed in Germany, I was running for the bathroom. I then proceeded to be on the floor of our host's bathroom for 2 days straight. And I was terrified because I was pregnant. Um, it was horrible. I'm not gonna lie.
Mm.
I missed most of Germany because I was so sick, but I was really hard on myself at the time. Like, what did I do wrong? And I didn't do anything wrong. I bought a product that was labeled gluten-free and I ate it. And that's what happened. Um and I think that luckily those accidents are few and far between. But for me, I just have to ride it out. And that was a horrible experience. But I think one thing, and this goes for anywhere in the world, is like you can't beat yourself up. Like mistakes happen. And and really it was more like afterwards. But I did also get strangely some like online bullying. Like that's what you get for eating out. And I'm sure as fellow travelers, like I'm not gonna stay home because I have celiac. Like I'm going to travel. And so that could have happened here. That could have happened anywhere in the world. And so what I really tried to do is like figure out where maybe I had a breakdown of communication. It wasn't, it was just me shopping. And then I moved on, you can't beat yourself up over it. It happens. Luckily, that was the only time in recent memory that I got glutened on a trip. I actually got gluten living in the US more than I did when I travel. So I just find overseas they take it way more seriously than they do in the United States. So
Oh, wow. Mark, do you have
Yeah.
anything to add?
I might throw an example in on from a cruise. We haven't talked too much about
Yeah.
cruises, but anyone who follows me will know I'm a huge advocate of cruises. I mean, cruises have their pros and cons, but in terms of taking food sensitivities, allergies, intolerances seriously, I think generally they go way above and beyond. Well, I mean, it's what we'd expect, but above and beyond compared to eating on land, perhaps in most places. I've done around 25 cruises, and there was one time I got sick. I was served a meal that they said, I think some kind of pastry that they said was gluten free, and I started eating it, and then the assistant maitre d ran over it. No, 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 that's the wrong one. I'm like, oh, nice of you to tell me now.
Yeah.
Um, they were very apologetic. The head maitre d came over and apologized. They gave me like a free specialty dinner, which is like $100 value at least. There were several staff who came to my like sent me notes to like they felt very bad. So did I, obviously. I'm fortunate that my symptoms aren't enough to drive me to the hospital or anything. I was in a lot of discomfort the following day, but it was just the one time, and I still remember it. But yeah, it's especially in places of the world where it's very difficult to eat gluten free. I'm thinking like East Asia, for example. Um, a cruise can be a great option to kind of have that safe home base, like, and whether it's Royal Caribbean, Celebrity, Disney, Holland America, I find Princess, they all are very, very good for taking food allergies and intolerances seriously, cooking things separately, following strict protocols. So a little shout out to cruise ships, even if that's my story where I was gluten, but they certainly don't make a habit of it.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. And I'm sure people watching would love to know that you've had a lot of success on cruises because I wouldn't even think that. So that's good to know. Um, I guess we've already shared moments that something didn't go to plan. So what advice would you give to someone traveling gluten-free for the first time?
I'll start. I think I mean we talk very international, but I think you can start local, right? Like I'm here in Montreal. I haven't explored much of Quebec yet, but I think for somebody newly diagnosed, like it could be as simple as trying a new restaurant and learning how to advocate for yourself in your own city and then
Hmm.
getting more comfortable over time. But I think anything that I would do, you know, locally, I would also do overseas and, you know, doing the research, asking the questions, even using translation cards. So I do use the French translation card quite a bit here in Montreal because I do not speak French fluently yet. But I also used cards when I was living in New York. I had Mandarin cards that I would use in Chinatown, or I would have a Spanish translation card that I would use in a lot of restaurants. So I think getting familiar with the tools, like Mark said, you know, using Find Me Gluten Free to do your research and you know, start small. Don't think you need to fly to Thailand tomorrow. Like you definitely do not. But I think learning how to be the advocate for yourself before you take your first big trip, I think that's really important.
I think that's a great tip. Nicole?
Yeah, I'm just going to say the other piece of that is do it. Don't not
Mhm.
travel because of your celiac diagnosis. I mean, I think we've got two beautiful examples on our panel here. Don't let this diagnosis prevent you from the joy that comes with travel. Do the work and the preparation. So
Mhm.
rewatch that little section of this webinar and do the work on that part and then go and enjoy it. And know that celiac disease is coming with you and that risks that you experience in your own city are risks that you're going to experience somewhere else as well. So nowhere are we immune to being glutened. We are, so as long as you do your preparation and you do the work, then your risk level is about the same as it would be if you were at home, unless you're dining out more frequently, in which case the increased risks there a little bit. But do it. Don't not travel because of this diagnosis.
Think
That's a
my
great point.
yeah, my tip would be to keep your expectations in check when you're traveling. Not in terms of safety, that's obviously a non-negotiable, but you're going to a hotel and they say full breakfast, and you're like, oh great, I can find something there. And it's usually true, like hard-boiled eggs, cheese, yeah, you can eat that, and at least you have something to eat, but that might be all, or maybe it's just the cheese. Full breakfast might be tons of pastry and scrambled eggs with flour in them to make them fluffier. Like you need to be ready. Like as we talked about at the beginning, have snacks with you. Go to local supermarkets, like Dr. Shar. Shout out to them. They are everywhere, from Eastern Europe to South America. Like they're all over the place. I see that. I'm like, oh, good. I can eat that. So buy it and have it when you're on the go during the day, or at the breakfast where they may say they have gluten-free bread, but then you show up, oh, we ran out a week ago, or just expectations in check in terms of there's not always going to be food available where you think there will be necessarily, and you don't want to go hungry, obviously. So that's where you bringing food along and having those plans in place, the contingency plans, is very important.
Yeah, that is great advice. So thank you so much to our panelists. So now we're going to actually, I think it's about time to turn it over to the audience. So let's take some questions. Feel free to add yours to the Q&A box. I know there's some already in here that we'll get to. We'll get through as many as we can now. So we'll go up to the top here. So from Judy, what are your best sources for research? I think we've already covered a little bit of that, but does someone want to kind of quickly go through their best source for research, your go-to?
I could give a plug. There's a celiac travel group on Facebook. I'm the founder of it. It's huge. There's like 48,000 people in it. It's tremendous. But there is someone that has been to where you're going. I guarantee, like it could be the smallest town in the middle of nowhere, and somebody in that group has been there.
Hmm.
So I know Mark's in the group and contributes a lot. And it's fascinating to me where people travel. So that's a little plug. Feel free to join. We have moderators from across the whole globe. So, but it's a great resource, and I use that for all of my trips as one of my tools, like in planning.
Yeah, I guess you could just use the search bar and
Yeah, and
search.
it's just group slash celiac travel. So
Yeah,
Awesome.
simple name. Yeah, I certainly agree. That's one of my first places I go, and even I was in Central Asia earlier this year, Uzbekistan. Yes, there are people who have been there, and there's a gluten-free bakery that was there, and
yeah,
it was so wonderful. And yes, there might only be one other person in the group who's been to some of these destinations, but comment. Can I send you a DM? I've
yeah.
talked to people that have
Hmm.
gone to certain places. I mean, it's one thing to type something, but to actually have a conversation and we celiacs we all look out for each other. We want you to be safe as much as we were. And that's why I love hearing from people too that ask questions of, have you been here? Any suggestions? And yeah, we're happy to help. And so is everyone in that celiac travel group and other groups that you'll find online.
Yeah, I love that. Anyone heard of the new Atli app? I'm not sure if it's a planner app or I've never heard of it before.
Yeah,
Have you
I
heard?
would use it lightly. They use a lot of AI, so
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Good to know. There was a few of questions about that. We use the Spoonful app to see if stuff is celiac safe in the US.
I don't know
I'm
that
not
app.
sure. Um, Interested in river cruises and would like to know your recommendation as it's not always possible or convenient to go on a specific gluten-free cruise. Mark, do you have
For
any insights on that?
for River specifically,
Yeah.
I've heard nothing but good things, and in fact, Celiac Canada I know has organized a couple. You might know
Hmm.
better, Kaylee and Nicole. I think down like the Rhine and Central Europe. Yeah, everything I've heard has been positive. Like they take food sensitivity issues very seriously, just like on the mainline cruise lines, like your Royal Caribbeans and so forth. And it's much smaller ship, so maybe you can get a bit more one-on-one with the chef kind of thing. I have celiac friends who have done river cruises. A former president of Celiac Canada, who also lives in Victoria, loves them. Has always had wonderful experiences.
I've heard exactly the same thing, that
Yeah.
river cruising can be fantastic.
Great. Um, any surprising destinations where you found it unexpectedly easy or difficult to travel celiac? I think that's a really good question.
Surprising. mm, I mean, the UK is just an incredible place to be celiac. But that wasn't surprising to me. I was expecting it.
Hmm.
I think people are surprised when I tell them Italy. I think
Yeah, that's true.
there's like a fantastic Italian Celiac Association. They certify restaurants. There's like an enormous selection. Italians love food and they don't want
Hmm.
anybody to go hungry. So I like to tell people that because they're like, yeah, the land of pasta. And I was like, no, no, like I cried happy tears because I ate pasta every day. So I think Italy is a nice, pleasant surprise.
Yeah, I've heard that one definitely a lot of times.
Yeah, like Nicole mentioned, it's often not a surprise because places like China I knew were going to be very difficult, and sure enough, they were.
Mm.
The recent trip I took, it was a tour of a number of former Soviet republics from Kazakhstan to Turkmenistan. And the at the beginning and the end of this, it was a group tour, so I had tour guides who spoke the language to help, which was also very useful. That's another tip.
Yeah.
Tour guides are your can be your biggest advocates. But there was a gluten-free bakery in Almaty, Kazakhstan, where we started the tour, and in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, where we ended the tour. Gluten-free bakery, obviously I'm skeptical, but
Mm.
the president of Russia's Celiac Society is a friend of mine. Been to Russia a couple times, long before the current situation. But I asked her if she had any knowledge of these bakeries. She phoned them up, spoke to them in Russian, interrogated them. They got their flours from Europe. You know, Europe is pretty strict on gluten-free labeling and that. So yes, I was able to meet them and stock up at the beginning of my trip, and then at the end. I know Aaron and Nicole were talking about the difficulty in going home, but if you can find a gluten-free bakery or a supermarket with gluten-free products at the end of your trip, you can address that need a little bit, and those kinds of packaged goods are never a problem to travel with as well. So that's a bonus.
Yeah, that's a good point. And someone was actually asking, can you talk a little bit more about traveling home? Because yeah, like we've said, sometimes it can be more difficult to travel back. So that's a good tip is find a spot where you can stock up and stock up for the plane.
And reserve your meal for the plane. Pretty much, almost all airlines have a gluten-free food option if you're flying internationally. Outside of the US, there probably will be a meal included, and you might be surprised. Within Asia, for example, even 2-hour flights usually have a meal included, in my experience. So check that out, book it. You can often book it right when you're booking your ticket,
Hmm.
and even if you do that, phone them again 3 weeks before your flight. You know, that's to make sure the reservation doesn't get lost. And yeah, 90% of the time, it should be there. I can only think of one time where they did not have my gluten-free meal that I had ordered. It's not great. You might not
Yeah.
want to eat it because it might just not be very palatable. But you know, bring those snacks along for backup.
Yeah, actually, a tip on that. If they change your seat, which happened to me, make sure you
Oh,
tell the flight attendant, because I've had my meal handed to the woman in front of me who immediately like
Oh,
ate my entire meal. And I was
oh
like,
no.
they kind of like put together from first class, like a little bit of fruit and a little bit of cheese. But I will say, bring backup. And to that point, I find coming back from overseas, and this is very US specific, coming back to the US from overseas, I've had way better luck than anything coming from the US to going overseas. So going, I never rely on the meals. It- it's just, and also like don't rely on unpackaged products. Like I think people like they'll give you a roll and it's probably from a bread basket and fill it with it's probably
Mhm.
gluten, and they're just handing them out to everyone, not even thinking, and you're getting gluten. So just be careful. You're in a flight,
Mhm.
you're for a very long flight, it's not pleasant if you get gluten on
mhm.
the airplane.
Yeah, definitely unpackaged bread would be a big caution for me.
Yeah.
But shout
Yeah.
out to Odo's, the sponsor. They do the bread for Via
Yes,
Rail.
they do.
If you go with Via Rail,
Oh,
business class with a meal included, it will probably be an Odo's bun.
I love that. Good plug. Nicole, were you going to add anything or
No, I
no?
wasn't.
Okay, perfect.
I'm happy to if you want me to, but no.
We have another question. Have you had any experience traveling to China or Japan? I'm planning a trip there this fall. Any of you?
Um, yeah, I've been in China
Yep.
twice in the last 3 years. One of my brothers lives there, actually. So it certainly is a very difficult destination to go to. But again, with planning, you can get by. Very few restaurants with celiac awareness there, and even if they do have it, you can't really be sure. Yeah, my brother's lived there for a few years now. He says, yeah, they'll tell you it's gluten-free, but they really don't know what it means. So when Shanghai was, I found nothing. You know, it was basically get a kitchen and cook for yourself. There were a couple gluten-free meals that I was served on group tours, but by gluten-free meal, I mean fruit and boiled vegetables with absolutely no sauce because you can't have any of it. Beijing, there were a couple. Going to expat areas of Beijing and Shanghai, a little bit more success. You'll pay through the nose for it. So be ready for that too. But again, like yeah, group tours. If you're going to be out and about, try to go with a guide who speaks Chinese. Obviously, be very careful at the hotel breakfasts. Things will be labeled gluten-free when they are not. I found that in both Beijing and Shanghai. You can't communicate with the staff most of the time. Not much English spoken. Even in the hotel, this was Holiday Inn. The staff at the front desk didn't speak English. They had to use handheld translation devices and point it at you. So, you get a tour guide if you're going to the Great Wall or something. You'll probably go for lunch because it's a day tour. Hammer at home how important it is. Bring your travel cards. Answer questions they have about it. Chances are they've had someone in the past who needed to eat gluten free. Like you're probably not going to be the first one. But just be ready. Bring your own food, most definitely, for some place like China. I can't speak too much to Japan. I think I've heard of a bit better results there, and other countries in Asia like Thailand and Vietnam. I've heard, and Thailand I've been in a little bit easier, but you still need to be prepared for a general low level of awareness of what celiac is and what gluten is, and the
Hmm.
fact that sauces have it. It's not just bread.
Can I ask, Mark, have you been to Singapore?
Yes, but only it was at the end of a cruise and I flew out the
Okay.
same
Okay.
day. I ate my own food I had, so I can't comment on
Okay.
restaurants.
Okay.
I have. I've
Yeah.
been to
Okay.
Singapore. And actually, to what your point earlier, Nicole, there is a gluten-free Singapore group, a support group, and I connected with them ahead of time. The founder of the group is from the US and her co-founder is from Australia. And they're fantastic. So if you're going to Singapore on your way to Australia, I'm happy to connect you with her.
We're
Um,
going through Fiji, but
okay.
Singapore is somewhere that I would love to go.
It's fascinating.
So
I
yeah.
recommend. I will say about Japan, I haven't personally been, but there is, of course, on Facebook, a group, Gluten-Free Japan Tours or something. And they are, I think it's an expat and a local that run it, but they will help you plan your whole tour. So I've bookmarked them
Amazing.
for future reference. But also to Mark's point, there's a lot of gluten-free travelers that have been to Japan that can share their information. I'm fascinated by Asia, but I'm also terrified by it because I'm afraid to get sick. But I've been to Thailand and Singapore with no issues. So
Right.
And I have Kathy in the question box. She asked, what language card brand do you use, Aaron? Do you have a specific one that you use?
I use Equal Eats. There's
Eats.
also Legal Nomads, which
Mhm.
are actually written by a woman from Canada. And those are more localized to cuisine. I have a long list on my website of both free and paid cards. I like the Equal Eats one because you can get them customized. And also select wisely. So I've used those in the past too. I have other food allergies, so usually I have a selection of cards with me. But I Equal Eats I use the most. But I do know people have had great success with the Legal Nomads translations as well.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I know I always link people to the Celiac Travel, I think it is.
Yeah, that's
And
the
they
free one. Yeah,
yeah, it's free and they have 63 different
yeah,
languages. So
yeah.
do you
I've used those.
find do you have any trouble when you give someone a card like that? Like, do people usually understand, or did you have any trouble in the past using them?
In Thailand, it actually worked too well. It kind of people sent me away after they read my card. They're like, "We're not feeding you."
Oh,
And at the
yeah.
time, I was very hangry, you know. But in retrospect, it was like, okay. Also in Thailand, I was on an island and I found that people actually couldn't read. So in the kitchens, and so my card was okay for the management, but it was like a lot of miscommunication. And so I kind of, shied away from eating there. But I will say, I think it's a great conversation starter. And Mark said something earlier. I've also used Google Translate on my phone to like
Yes.
ask questions and then, share it with the server or the manager. Because sometimes the card starts the conversation, but then you have additional questions. Um, so yeah, I've
Yeah,
never had it backfire on me, except that they wouldn't feed me because they were scared to feed me. So
yeah, they were like, this is too much.
yeah, they were like,
Yeah.
no, you're a flight risk or
Too much
something.
trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been there. One other tip I might add is also bring some of them in English.
Yeah.
At the end of my recent trip, we went to Mongolia, and the only restaurant in Ulaanbaatar, the capital, that was highly rated was an Indian restaurant. And I went in there. I had my card in Mongolian, and they said the chef is from India. He doesn't speak Mongolian. Do you have it in English? And I was like, yes, I do actually. Because and Singapore might be another example where they might not really understand celiac super well, but they speak English. So, and maybe you can't go to the kitchen and talk to the chef necessarily, but at least to have those on hand, I mean, take it. I don't need it back. Give it to
Yeah.
them. They can take it back to the chef. One restaurant I was in actually said they were going to put it on the wall for
Oh,
future
wow.
reference for other travelers. It's like, yeah, who doesn't like that, right?
That's
Yeah, I
great.
love that. Um, we did have Lisa. She said that she had an issue with her translation card in Malaysia. People did not read it, so I think that's maybe where bringing an English one maybe would be helpful. I think we'll end off on one more. What are your favorite tropical or hot destinations that are easy to find gluten-free food? I think that's a fun one.
Well, I'm hoping it's going to be Australia.
Yeah.
And Fiji. I'm
Yeah.
a bit worried about Fiji, but the resort that we're staying at, I did call ahead and I've done my research online to see what we can do. And the menus online at the resort we don't have a kitchen at this one, which is very against how I normally travel. But we are packing things, and I've done a lot of research to make sure that there will be options available. So the other point that I just wanted to squeeze in here as well is if you're ordering on an online ordering system for food when you get to a location,
Mm.
do make sure that what you get is what you ordered. We have had instances where foods have been substituted. And it was gluten-free chicken nuggets I ordered one time on Instacart, and regular chicken nuggets came. So really do your due diligence, just like you would at home. Substitutions can happen, so do check on that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Anyone else?
Um, I could talk about for all-inclusive resorts. I know that's a popular one. Cuba, Dominican Republic, Mexico, Jamaica. I've read lots of success stories and a few horror stories. Number one, you get what you pay for. A two-star resort versus a 4 or 5 star resort. The service is a bit better. They'll be a bit more attentive. So that's something to keep in mind. It's a guideline, but it's not a perfect system. Like Jamaica, for example, they speak English. St. Lucia English. I mean, the countries where the Spanish is the first language, you may encounter a language barrier, but that's where the travel cards can be helpful. And when you go to an all-inclusive, no matter what country it is in the Caribbean, generally you'll also get a certain number of a la carte dinners included. Buffets are a constant source of danger there. At breakfast you might be able to pick out things, but lunch buffets are terrible in terms of tongs getting moved around. Uh, there might not be protocols in the kitchen necessarily to avoid cross-contamination as they bring things out. Yeah, if you're eating there for lunch, because often the a la cartes are dinner only for dinner, ask to speak to a manager or the head waiter or whoever. Explain your needs to them directly, and often they can bring a plate out from the back without any tongs or anything having touched it, so that can help. But use the a la cartes as much as you can, and if you explain the seriousness of your sensitivity, they may even give you a few extra. I've had that
Mhm.
happen. If you're respectable about it, and you're like, this is the situation. I don't want to be sick. They don't want you to be sick either. And a la cartes, that's where you're sitting down with a menu. It's not a buffet, so you get the one-on-one attention with your server. So please do take advantage of those.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that since I came home on Saturday from an all-inclusive.
Mhm.
I had contacted them ahead of time and asked if they could send me the menus for all of the a la carte menus so I could at least review it ahead of time. And then I explained I explained my celiac, and then when I checked in, they actually had a letter prepared for me. And this is like the third or fourth place that I've stayed where they give me a letter on check-in that says, I have celiac. I was in Mexico, so the letter was in Spanish. And then I just presented that. We had to make reservations at our a la carte restaurants ahead of time. So, and then, so it was noted in my reservation. And then when I checked in for the reservation, I gave them the letter to kind of say, hey, and I was at the Barcelo, south of Punta Cana, or sorry, south of Playa del Carmen. And there were 11 restaurant buffets and then 3 like specialties. So I had a huge selection of places I could eat. And every restaurant there was great. They read my letter. They, you know, told me if, like in the steakhouse, they told me about the grill. Like they were very, very careful. But also like I had this letter with me. And that's the second or third time I've stayed at the Barcelo resorts around the world. And every location has been the same and presented me with a letter on check-in. So, you know, again, it goes back to the very beginning, is like doing your research and your communications ahead of time. It's so reassuring that when they tell you your room, they're also giving you this letter that says, you know, you have to eat gluten-free.
That's awesome. Great tips, everyone. And thank you so much. I think this webinar was full of amazing advice for people who are looking to travel. And are worried, they can refer to this. Again, this was recorded, so it'll be sent to everyone by Friday, so watch out for that. The winner is for the Odos. I almost forgot about that. The winner is Christina Faulkner. So we will be in touch, and congratulations, you get a swag bag from Odos. Yeah. So everyone, take care. Thank you again so much. Safe travels if you're planning anything, and have a great night.
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.